Once again, Christian greetings to all our valued listeners and viewers throughout the whole world. This is our special episode number 3 on the subject, the fulfillment of Ezekiel 9. Now, I would like to read again the statement on 2SR 216 saying, 2SR 216, the purification of the church, it says the separation of the tares from the wheat, the fulfillment of Ezekiel 9. Now, let us distinctly separate the executive judgment that takes place in the heavenly sanctuary and the executive judgment that takes place on the earthly sanctuary. The executive judgment that takes place in the heavenly sanctuary is blotting out of names. Of course, that would be on the Day of Atonement. On Bible calendar, that is always fall on October 10. Now, to all who are listening, all the Bidian, I would like to say, brothers and sisters, that concerning this Day of Atonement, the great controversy plainly declared here, I would like to read to you. Great controversy 490. Let us read the statement. The great controversy 490. The righteous and the wicked will still be living upon the earth in their mortal state. Men will be planting and building, eating and drinking, all unconscious that the final irrevocable decision has been pronounced in the sanctuary above. So that is very plain. All unconscious that the final irrevocable decision has been pronounced in the sanctuary above. When would that be? While the righteous are still in their mortal state. Let us read first the writings of Alonso Jones. Says that no one can inherit that kingdom in our mortal state. We need to be immortalized first. I would like to deal this portion very carefully, and I will try my best that those who are honest and sincere could be able to comprehend it. That is not the statement. Alonzo Jones saying that it cannot be inherited by a dying people. We quoted that passage several times. So let us read. It says, so let us read the statement. Jesus said, the saints will be rewarded at the resurrection of the just. Luke 14 verse 14. The resurrection of the just takes place when Christ himself returns to the earth. 1 Thessalonians 4 verse 15 and 17. That is the second visible coming of Jesus Christ. But first of all, we know that Sister White and Alonzo Jones has no definite knowledge concerning the spatial resurrection. And the only resurrection which is common to their understanding is the resurrection at the second visible coming of Jesus Christ. But the thought is that there are only two ways by which the saints will be immortalized, either by resurrection or either by translation. And then it says, let's continue reading, saying, and they cannot inherit it before the resurrection. For Paul says that flesh and blood, man in a mortal state, cannot inherit the kingdom of God. Neither that corruption inherit incorruption. 1 Corinthians 15 verse 50. Christ's kingdom is an everlasting kingdom which cannot be inherited by dying people. They must first be immortalized by the resurrection or a translation. So, it says, God hath chosen the poor of this world, rich in faith, heirs of the kingdom which he hath promised. To them that love him, James 2 verse 5. They who are rich in faith and love God are now heirs of the kingdom, and they will inherit it when Jesus comes and redeems them from the bondage of corruption. So, in that reading, I would like to make a simple illustration. For example, this is the premillennial kingdom, the literal premillennial kingdom. No one could enter this kingdom in their mortal state. No one can inherit God's kingdom in their mortal state. They must be first immortalized. Now, the statement in the Great Controversy 490 saying that the irrevocable decision has been pronounced in the sanctuary above while the righteous are still in their mortal state. This irrevocable decision must be pronounced prior to the kingdom. Because when the kingdom will be established, the people will inherit that kingdom. Must be immortalized first. The dead saints, they will be immortalized by resurrection, but the living saints by translation. But in our study in Matthew 20, in our study in Matthew chapter 20, it is the 144,000 living saints that will be first be rewarded. And what is that reward? Immortal life. Now let us read 2SR. Page 235. Why were the first paid last and the last first? Answer. The pay God's servants receive is eternal life and is characterized by the penny. Therefore, those who are granted the assurance of a never-ending life first are those who were hard last. And according to the parable, it was the company called at the 11th hour. They are those who are marked or sealed by the man with the writer's inkhorn of Ezekiel 9. Or as John calls him, the angel with the seal of God, and he sealed or marked 144,000. See Revelation 7. This glorious company is the first who are granted the assurance of never tasting death. To SR 235. Here's another statement in 1TG. Number 42 on page 8. The word behold suggests that we should now take notice and be able to see that our salvation cometh, and that while his reward is with him, his work is still before him. What is his reward? What else could it be but life forevermore? So it shall be that the first fruits, the 144,000, the servants of God, who are soon to stand on Mount Zion with the Lamb, shall be the first to be rewarded. 1TG number 42, page 8. You see? The statement is very plain. It is the 144,000 living saints, the very first one to be rewarded, to be granted immortality. Here in White House Recruiter, on page 38 and page 39. Consequently, White House Recruiter, page 38 and 39. Consequently, the 11th hour servants are the first to receive their reward, the penny. They live on to meet their God, to hear him speak unto them the thrilling commendation, well done, thou good and faithful servant, enter thou into the joy of the Lord. Matthew 25, verse 21. And we know that that penny is called eternal life. Now let us go back to the great controversy. Let us go back again to the reading. The Great Controversy, page 490. It says, the righteous and the wicked will still be living upon the earth in their mortal state. Men will be planting and building, eating and drinking, all unconscious that the final irrevocable decision has been pronounced in the sanctuary above. Now, the statement, in their mortal state, can only be applied to the righteous because immortality will never be granted to the wicked. But the important part on this paragraph, that such irrevocable decision will be pronounced in the heavenly sanctuary while the righteous are still in their mortal state. Not at the time when immortality will be granted to them. Let us read again the statement on 2SR. (220) saying, for the judgment, blotting out the sins, is the crowning act in the gospel of Christ. Thus we conclude that when the seal is opened and the judgment for the living begins, we must know it. The Day of Atonement in its type proves the same, for the Israelites were well informed of the event, their duty, and the consequence. That statement is very plain. When the Day of Atonement, brothers and sisters, will take place, the saints, the living saints, they need to know it. For in the illustration, in the type, the Israelites were well informed of the event and the consequence. I would like to read the Great Controversy, (430). The Great Controversy, or 431. It says, the condition of the unbelieving Jews illustrates the condition of the careless and unbelieving among professed Christians who are willingly ignorant of the work of our merciful high priest. In the typical service, when the high priest entered the most holy place, all Israel were required to gather about the sanctuary and in the most solemn manner humble their souls before God, that they might receive the pardon of their sins and not be cut off from the congregation. How much more essential in this antitypical Day of Atonement that we understand the work of our high priest and know what duties are required of us. The Great Controversy, page 431. How much more essential in this antitypical Day of Atonement that we understand the work of our high priest and know what duties are required of us. Now, look at 2SR 164. I plead all the obedient to study this closely, because supposed to be, if you want to be among the 144,000 living saints, you need to humble yourselves. Be a repentant sinner, that through the loving kindness and grace given by God, it's so because of the prayers of the saints, our names had not been blotted out. We need to be very thankful, and gratitude should swell in our hearts, rather than to oppose the message. But I do fully believe, without any doubts, that the people will oppose this message. The only reason is that because their names had been blotted out. Because those people, those names that had been retained in the Lamb's Book of Life, there is a responsive call in their lives, brothers and sisters, that they will accept and receive this message. Why? Because their names had been retained. And it cannot be mistaken. Now, let's go back again to 2SR 164. It says, I would like to read the entire paragraph. To SR page 164, for the benefits of my fellow shepherds, rod believer. When the judgment open and when that part of the work is finished, then commences the judgment of the living. While the investigation for the congregation of the dead is in progress, there can be no separation among the congregation of the living. But when our high priest shall begin the atonement for the living, there must be a message of present truth, sounding of the trumpet, urging everyone to lay hold on the lamp of God, which is Jesus Christ, by which only can he in figure come to the sanctuary, confess his sin, and secure his life. Unless the close of the judgment for the dead and the commencement for the living be made known to us, we would have no present truth, while the judgment for the living is in session. Neither would such judgment be legal or just. He who fails to respond to the heavenly summons will be left without the seal or covering of God, and therefore must be cut off from among his people, as prefigured by the services in the typical Day of Atonement. To SR page 164. I would like to focus to that statement. Unless the close of the judgment for the dead and the commencement for the living be made known to us, we would have no present truth, while the judgment for the living is in session. Plainly indicating that the 11th hour church the only church in the judgment for the living? They have complete knowledge when the judgment for the dead close and the commencement of the judgment for the living. Because if they have no knowledge, they have no present truth. Unless the close of the judgment for the dead and the commencement for the living be made known to you, you have no present truth. That is the statement. The word unless is synonymous to the word except. B.T. Hotep has no knowledge when the judgment that pertains to the dead and in the living will begins. Either exact or approximate. That is his own testimony. Here in answerer number 1, on page 94 and 95, it says, in the statement in question, the rod has no reference to the investigative judgment. The message sets no date, either exact or approximate, for the closing of the judgment of the dead or for the beginning of the judgment of the living. The time of the cessation of the one event and the beginning of the other is not to be known until the one is past and the other begun. So the prophet himself declared clearly that they have no message, they have no knowledge when the judgment that pertains to the dead will close and when the judgment for the living begins, either exact or approximate. Because it will not be made known until the one is past and the other begun. Why? Because the scripture is inscribed in present tense. According to 1 SR 156 to 157, that God did not intend to make the judgment known before the actual time had come in order to be grammatically correct. Now, brothers and sisters, in what way that we discovered that the judgment for the dead closed in April 1, 2020? April 1, 2020 is Gregorian calendar. In Bible calendar, that is October 10, 2021. How do we know? Because of the Bible calendar that had been restored. And I would like to show to you, let us show to them, the Bible or the time and date calculator. April 1, 2020. Then put the arrow. You see October 10? October 10, 2021. That is time and date calculator. April 1, 2020 is October 10, 2021 in Bible calendar. Therefore, April 1, 2020, that is Day of Atonement. Because in Bible calendar, that is October 10. What is our proof that that is the close of the judgment for the dead in the holy place? First of all, before I would like to explain, that statement in Revelation 3 verse 7 and 8 is applied to the sanctuary in heaven. Now let us read early writings. Early writings, on page 42. The open and shut door. It says, I saw that Jesus, early writings, page 42. I saw that Jesus had shut the door of the holy place, and no man can open it. And that he had opened the door into the most holy place, and no man can shut it. Revelation 3 verse 7 and 8. So Revelation chapter 3 verses 7 and 8 is applied to the proceedings in the heavenly sanctuary. Now let us read page 43. The enemies of the present truth had been trying to open the door of the holy place that Jesus has shut, and to close the door of the most holy place, which he opened in 1844. Now this is my question. Where is the place? Early writings, page 43. Where is the place by which the holy place had been closed and the most holy place had been opened? Third heaven. It was in the third heaven. Now, are we saying that the enemies of present truth goes to the third heaven and they are trying to open the door of the holy place? And trying to close the door in the most holy place? How could he be able to close the door in the most holy place unless he will enter to the holy place? So this reading is not to be taken as in literal aspect, but rather, brethren, the enemies, of course, that is Satan. He is trying to counterfeit such doctrine, sanctuary doctrine, taught by Sister White. But he completely failed. Completely failed. From October 22, 1844, up to this present time, 2021, there was not even any movement or single individual that been able to counterfeit the doctrine of the sanctuary doctrine. If someone will say, Jesus Christ entered to the most holy place in 1845, so that is a counterfeit to the message of Sister White. Or says, Jesus Christ entered to the most holy place in 1847, that is a counterfeit. But the fact is that there was no counterfeit at all. For the Bible declared clearly that it was revealed in the book of Daniel. The work of the devil is to trodden underfoot the daily and the sanctuary. Not the counterfeit. Now, I read that several times, that according to the Shepherd's Rod in 2 SR 193, that the 5th chapter of Revelation need to be closely studied by those who will act a part in the closing work of the gospel. Who are they? In 2 SR 146, they are the 144,000 living saints. Or in other words, that admonition given in 7 BC 970, saying, strive with all the power that God has given us to be among the 144,000. Brothers and sisters, is to study the 5th chapter of Revelation. I would like to read again 2 SR 193 since it was not quoted. The 5th chapter of Revelation needs to be closely studied. It is of great importance to those who shall act a part in the work of God for these last days. 2 SR 193. And then it says, but the 5th chapter, separated from the 4th and 6th, cannot be comprehended, for these chapters contain one subject, namely the 7 seals. The 5th chapter is mentioned because it is the heart and key of the subject. What is the heart and the key of the subject? What subject? The subject of the 7 seals. What is the heart and the key? Revelation chapter 5. How many verses Revelation chapter 5? 14. Indicating completeness. 2, number 7. Chapter 5, the number of the Bible. But the first 5 verses, the first 5 verses in Revelation chapter 5, that is a divine decree. No man in heaven, nor in earth, nor under the earth, even the devil either, can open that book. What is that book? The book of the 7 seals. Now, brothers and sisters, the only knowledge that was given by God to Sister White is October 22, 1844, that Jesus Christ entered to the most holy place in October 22, 1844. That is the only knowledge that was given by God to Sister White. She has no knowledge when the first seal had been opened, and when the first seal had been closed, when the second seal had been opened, and when the second seal had been closed, because it is consecutively broken according to tract number 15. I would like to read tract number 15 on page 10. It being in 7 sections, each section individually sealed, 7 seals in all are consecutively broken. How many section? 7. and it is consecutively broken. That is why B.T. Hotep plainly told us that without the knowledge of the sanctuary doctrine, it says here in 2SR 187, the seven seals and the sanctuary. The seven seals and the sanctuary. In order to make a proper application of the seven seals, we must have a better understanding of the heavenly sanctuary service, its origin, the object of its existence as taught by the earthly sanctuary built by Moses. Hebrews chapter 8 verse 5. In the sanctuary construction and service is revealed the plan of salvation. So there is no possibility that you could understand the subject of the seven seals unless you have a better understanding concerning the sanctuary service. Now, brothers and sisters, this is the very thing that we need to realize. Why is it that the shepherds were declared that the heart and the key of the subject, what subject? The subject of the seven seals, is Revelation chapter 5. Why? What is the key? Revelation chapter 5. The seven seals. The subject of the seven seals, there is divine code. Let us read again to TG 44. On page 30 and page 31, we as Christians have obviously failed to note that the secret things of God matter not how simple, were to be unsealed at any time by anyone. Inspiration would never in the first place have canceled them in symbols and parables. Christendom is still blind to the fact that to attempt to break into the mysteries of God would be to attempt to defeat His purposes. Yes, to try to break into the divine code is to try the impossible. For example, even when the time did came for the book sealed with seven seals to be unsealed, Revelation 4 and 5, no one in heaven or on earth was able to do so, but only the Lion of the tribe of Judah could break the seals and look into the things which afterwards were shown to John the Revelator. And though John wrote them, he himself could not before time explain them. Then how can we do such before time and without the inspiration of the same Spirit who indicted them? To TG 44, page 30 and page 31. Do we believe that statement? That the subject of the seven seals, there is a divine code. By with such divine code, no man in heaven nor on earth could break that code. What is the key? Chapter 5. What does it mean? That the key is chapter 5. Easy to understand that only Jesus Christ who holdeth the key. The Lion of the tribe of Judah, in tract number 12, page 63. To open without a key, a locked door is, of course, to break the door. But being unbreakable, the locked door of prophecy is impossible to open without the key. Impossible to open without the key. That is very plain. Brothers and sisters, what is the locked door of prophecy? Unbreakable. How much more to the subject of the seven seals? Because of all the subject recorded in the Bible, the statement that no man in heaven nor on earth can open. That subject is pertaining to the seven seals. No man in heaven nor in earth, even the devil, can explain them because it is sealed with a divine code. B.T. Hotep himself declared clearly in 2TG24 on page 16, are not these tests strong enough to convince any of you that the secret things of God, such as the canceled prophecies, are not disclosed by finite men, no, not by the devil either, that when God wants a thing to be a secret, it remains canceled until He Himself reveals it. Then when it is revealed, all are to know that God Himself is at work. 2TG24, page 16. That is strong enough to convince any individual which is honest and sincere. That even the devil cannot do either. Now, if you will be saying that we have been able to proclaim, we have been able to explain the entire proceedings of the heavenly sanctuary from October 22, 1844, from start to finish, and we have been able to break the seven seals with our own wisdom, with our own knowledge, then you are saying that the Bible is telling a lie. No man on earth could open it. Even to look. The Bible says, even to look, just to look. Why is it that Sister White had been able to see that Jesus Christ entered to the most holy place? Because the Spirit of Christ is within. That channel. Without the Spirit of Christ, she could see nothing. And that is why it really very disheartening. Why not study the shepherd's rod? The shepherd's rod says, unless the close of the judgment for the dead and the commencement for the living be made known to us, we would have no present truth while the judgment for the living is in session. The question, unto whom such present truth cometh? Only from God. 11 Symbolic Code, number 3, page 5. Present truth comes only from God. Brothers and sisters, the shepherd's rod declared clearly. I would like to read to you two passages, tract 15, page 13. Both seers distinctly declare that the event which they saw was the judgment. The difference between the two scenes is that Daniel was led to look into the sanctuary, while preparations were being made for the judgment to convene. Whereas John was led to look into the sanctuary after the judgment had been set up. In fact, John not only saw the judgment in progress, but he saw the whole proceeding from start to finish. In page 14, it says, to repeat, Daniel saw only a part of the preparations, whereas John saw the opening of the judgment and the entire proceedings thereafter. The statement in track 1513, Daniel saw the whole proceedings from start to finish. In page 14, the entire proceedings. That is the book of Revelation. And what is the statement? In 2 TJ 44:31, saying, although John wrote them, he himself could not explain it before time. He is only the writer of the book of Revelation, but in reality, he did not understand the proceedings in the heavenly sanctuary. But the entire proceedings in the heavenly sanctuary, the whole proceedings from start to finish, was given by God to John the Revelator. But the fact is that the same Spirit that inspired John the Revelator, the Spirit of Christ, inspired Betty Hotep. And through the Shepherd's Rod publications, brothers and sisters, we can understand the entire proceedings, the whole proceedings from start to finish. Now, I would like to read track number 1. On page 29 and page 30. It says, as the words which Ezekiel was to speak to his people were found in the book which he ate, the book can be none other than the Bible. So what is that book that had been given by God to Ezekiel? That Ezekiel would eat the book. That is the Bible. And logically, it is even more definitely applied to his own book, the book of Ezekiel. Now, brothers and sisters, for example, in Ezekiel So, I would like to read Ezekiel chapter 5, verse 1, 2, and 3. It says, and thou, son of man, take thee a sharp knife, take thee a barber's razor, and cause it to pass upon thine head and upon thy bird. Then take thee balances to weigh and divide the hair. Thou shalt burn with fire a third part in the midst of the city. When the days of the seeds are fulfilled, and thou shalt take a third part and smite about it with a knife, and a third part thou shalt scatter in the wind, and I will draw out a sword after them. Now, remember, verse 2, it says, when the days of thy seeds are fulfilled. How many days given by God to Ezekiel? Now, let us read Ezekiel chapter 4. It says, verse 1 and verse 2, Thou also, son of man, take thee a tile, and lay it before thee, and portray upon it the city, even Jerusalem. And lay siege against it, and build a port against it, and cast a mount against it, set the camp also against it, set battering rams against it round about. And then it says, on verse 5, For I have laid upon thee the years of their iniquity, according to the number of the days, 390 days shalt thou bear the iniquity of the house of Israel. Verse 6, And when thou hast accomplished them, lie again on thy right side, and thou shalt bear the iniquity of the house of Judah 40 days. I have appointed thee each day for a year. Therefore thou shalt set thy face toward the siege of Jerusalem, and thine arm shall be uncovered, and thou shalt prophesy against it. And behold, I will lay bands upon thee, and thou shalt not turn thee from one side to another, till thou hast ended the days of thy siege. How many days? In Ezekiel chapter 4, the siege, 430 days. 390 plus 40. 430 days. And we know that it is 430 years. The 430 days equivalent to 430 years. Now, the Bible declared clearly in Ezekiel chapter 5, verse 1 and 2, that after the siege, brothers and sisters, it says, And thou shalt take a third part, and smite about it with a knife, and a third part thou shalt scatter in the wind, and I will draw out a sword after them. The city will be divided into three. According to the Bible. What is the city mentioned in Ezekiel chapter 4? Now let us read 1 SR. here in 1SR 129, the city, Jerusalem, is God's church. Namely, the Seventh-day Adventist Israel. 1SR, page 129. What is the city? According to the shepherd's rod, the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And according to the voice of inspiration, the city will be divided into three. And only the third part will be saved. The two parts will be lost. So in this instance, the symbolical earth and the literal earth is the same. Because the literal earth also will be divided into three. Let us read tract number 5. Tract number 5 on page 94 and page 95. Zechariah 13 verse 8 and 9. Zechariah 13 verses 8 and verse 9. So I would like to read the statement. It says here, on tract number 5, page 94 and 95. 2 parts lost and 1 part saved. Make 3 parts in all. The 1/3, Revelation 9:15, shall be slain by fire, smoke, and brimstone. Verse 18. Before probation closes, the remaining wicked who are slain by the 7 last plagues, Revelation 16, and by the brightness of his coming, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 8, after probation closes, make the other 1/3. The saved, the last 1/3, are 1/3 left therein, Zechariah 13 verse 8. And that is the great multitude, which exactly foretelling the number of the great multitude. 2 billion mortals. Now, I would like to read on White House Recruiter, page 31. With well over 2 billion mortals ripe or ripening in the great harvest field, we may well consider the greatness of the harvest. The Lord Himself affirms, the harvest truly is plenteous, but the laborers are few. Matthew 9 verse 37, most dreadful though are its consequences for the tares and the chaff, when the realization that they are lost sweeps over them, and in horror they cry out, the harvest is past, the summer is ended, and we are not saved. Jeremiah 8:20. So that statement cannot be applied in the days of BT Hotep, because the great multitude is 2 billion, over 2 billion, more than 2 billion. Why? Because in the days of Bitihotep, the population of the world is only 2 billion. How could it be that that is the third part? Exactly fits in the generation in which we are living, because the population today is more than 7 billion. Therefore, if you will divide it into 3, so the third part is also more than 2 billion. So there must be more or less 4 billion that will suffer the destruction. But our subject is Ezekiel 4 and Ezekiel 5 verse 1 and 2. Plainly telling us, brethren, that the city will be divided into 3. The same with the literal earth. This city is also divided into 3. Bible says only one of the 3 that will be saved. Although we will focus that subject on the subject, the numbering of the saints. But at this time, as I've said, let us focus our attention to that statement, unless the close of the judgment for the dead be made known to us. And thank God, such knowledge graciously placed in our hands. In what way? How do we know that April 1, 2020, that is the Day of Atonement in Bible calendar? The only answer that I could give is that through the restoration of the Bible calendar. One of the strongest proof of the 11th hour movement, that is the movement which is of God, because that knowledge, the restoration of the Bible calendar, can only be found in the 11th hour movement. All others, they were only guessing, assumption. If you will say Bible calendar, your basis must only be the Bible. How could you say Bible calendar and your basis is another book? Unto whom such sacred yearly calendar was given by God? Unto whom it was given? Answerer. Number 3. Page 10. To prevent his people from bringing upon themselves such a catastrophe, and to have them intelligent as to the time the year begins, the Lord gave to Moses the sacred yearly calendar, which cannot be lost or miscalculated so long as the earth remains. And no one could say that the earth at this time no longer remains. Since the earth still remains, the sacred yearly calendar cannot be lost, neither miscalculated. Unto whom such sacred yearly calendar was given by God? To Moses. Therefore, the restoration of the Bible calendar, the information must be found in the writings of Moses. Because that is very plain in that statement. In answerer number 3, page 10 and 11. And there are only 5 books of Moses, Pentateuch. Where in the 5 books of Moses that we could ascertain clearly the restoration of the sacred yearly calendar. First of all, it is on the account of the flood. As a matter of fact, the Shepherd's Rod called it antediluvian calendar. Now let us read 2 SR. It says here, to SR page 247. The second month and the 17th day of the month was the date of the solar year according to the antediluvian calendar. What calendar? Antediluvian calendar. Where we could find the history of the antediluvian world? Genesis. It says here in 2SR 248, this fact proves that the antediluvian monthly calendar consisted of 30 days to a month. So from the time when Noah entered to the ark, the total number of days is 377 days. Now let me read to you 248. The following is a summary and a grand total of days. 40 while remaining, 110 to the time they began to subside, 164 days for the waters to recede in the bowels of the earth, and 56 for the earth to dry, making a total of 370 days, and 7 before the flood had started, reaching a grand total of 377 days. 12 months. You see, 12 months and 17 days in all. So the statement 12 months and 17 days in all, it says 30 days to the month. So the Shepherd's Rod made it so plain that the Bible calendar, the creation calendar, consisted only 360 days every year. Not 365, not 366. Exactly 360 days, because the earth is circle. And circle has only 360 degrees. That is in Isaiah, in the circle of the earth. So I would like to repeat again, brothers and sisters, although plenty of proofs, abundance of evidences, but to those who are honest, sincere, those evidences are sufficient enough. To repeat again, what is the statement that I told you that you will find? There are 360 days in 1 year. As I told you, that is in the book of Isaiah. In the circle of the earth. Isaiah 40 verse 22, it says, "It is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth." So the description of the Bible concerning the earth is circle. The same with the discovery of Galilee. As a matter of fact, there is a scientist who declared that the original yearly cycle is 360 days every year. It says in page 85 in track number 5, "Once men fought the astronomical findings of Galileo, they even forced him to recant his position that the earth was round." But the earth was round. The earth is circle. And the Shepherd's Rod made it so plain that the Bible calendar consisted only 360 days every year. And the entire account of the flood is 1 year and 17 days. 377 days all in all. 30 days to a month. Now, it's easy. For example, I would like to read track number 6. Page 20 and 21. These olive trees are called witnesses, anointed ones, prophets. They were to prophesy in sackcloth for the space of 42 months. This is a period equivalent to that in Daniel 7:25 and Revelation 12:14. That is to a time and times and dividing of time. A time 1 year, times 2 years, half a time, half a year. Now, if that counting is 365 days. Now, let us count. In Daniel 7:25, 1 year, 365. 2 years. How many? 2 years, 365. 365. Then 730. Half a year. 365. Divided by 182. At least 182. Let us count. 7, 17, 12. So it must be 1,277 years instead of 1,260 years. Wake up, brethren. Bible prophecy must be reckoned with Bible reckoning. Now let us read again the statement. In tract number 6, page 20 and 21. It is equivalent also to that in Revelation 13:5. 40 and 2 months, and to that in Revelation 12:6, 1,203 score days. In each instance, the time reckoning by the biblical rule of 30 days to a month amounts to 1,260 days. Biblical rule of reckoning, 30 days to a month. Now, for example, I would like to show to you just a very simple formula. For example, this is October 10. Now, just granting this October 10 is 31 AD. Of course, the remaining days here is it 20? 20. Because 30 days, right? Then we have November. November, then you have 30. December, 30. January, 30. February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October. Now, this one is 30. Let us just count. November, December, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So, 11 times 30. Is it 11? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September. Yes. So, that is 11. Then, we have 11 times 30 equals 330. So, we have 330. Then, plus 20. Then, October 10. This is October 10. The 32 AD. October 10, 32 AD. 10. Then, let us add. 330 plus 20 plus 10. 330 plus 20 plus 10. 360. Therefore, from October 10, 31 AD, 30 days to a month, to October 10, 32 AD, there must be exactly 360 days from one day of atonement to another day of atonement. Do we understand? There must be exactly 360 days from one day of atonement to another. Now, brothers and sisters, we studied several times that October 22, 1844, that is Gregorian calendar. Right? That is Gregorian calendar. Now, granting Brothers and sisters, that is October 10. October 10. So October 22, Gregorian calendar, in Bible calendar, October 10. Let us read the great controversy. The great controversy. Page 400. The 10th day of the 7th month, the great day of atonement, the time of the cleansing of the sanctuary, which in the year 1844 fell upon the 22nd of October. Great controversy, page 400. So, October 10, the great day of atonement, in Gregorian calendar, it fell on October 22, 22nd of October. So to locate the Day of Atonement, we will just count the number of days. How many days from one Day of Atonement to another? 360 days. Now, I would like to show to you that March 27, 2021, brothers and sisters, let us add 179 years times 360 equals 64,440 days. If you have calculator, take your calculator. 179 years. Finding Bible calendar times 360 equals 64,440 days. Now, let us now add, because the time and date calculator cannot be mistaken. Let us add October 22, 1844. No, what's that? Time and date calculator. Okay. October 22, 1844. Then let us add 64,440 days. You see, brothers and sisters, you will fall on March 28, 2021. March 28, 2021. The difference between the calendar on earth, it will change on sunset or even. But the calendar in heaven, it will change at midnight. That is the reason of the message, the midnight cry. You see, March 28, 2021 is October 11. Just by counting the days. So by counting the days, without any doubt, March 27, 2021, this day is the Day of Atonement in Bible calendar. How do we know that that is the blotting out of names under the worshipers? Brethren, there are only 3 classes of saints to be judged in the holy place according to the shepherd's rod. In tract number 5, 109. That is the temple, the altar, and the worshipers. This temple and altar, according to the shepherd's rod, both of them are inanimate objects, indicating to all the saints that will be resurrected. So the altar is the last constituent of the saints to be resurrected, and that is the sixth seal. Of course, the cases of the sixth seal cannot begin not until the cases of the first five seals will be finished. Because it is consecutive order. The cases of the first seal first, then the cases of the second seal, and so on and so on. And the last cases to be considered in the judicial proceedings in the heavenly sanctuary is the sixth seal, the altar. And how do we know that it was April 1, 2020? Through the book of Ezekiel. Ezekiel 45 verse 18. Let us read. Ezekiel 45 verse 18. It says here, thus saith the Lord God, in the first month, in the first day of the month. What is the first month? April. What is the first day? 1. April 1. Thou shalt take a young bullock without blemish and cleanse the sanctuary. Maybe all of us are familiar with Isaiah chapter 7. Young bullock is the same with the young cow. Why is it that the Bible call it young bullock? Because that is under the sixth seal. The last seal to be cleansed. What is the young cow? The writings of Sister White and B.T. Hotep, all of us agreed. Because the two sheep represent the Bible. Why is it God placed young bullock? To let us know that that proceedings is under the sixth seal. That such proceedings will be finished on April 1. But there is no day of atonement in April 1. That is a miracle. Because that April 1 is Gregorian. Let us look at timeanddeath.com. April 1, 2020. April 1, 2020. You see? In Bible calendar, that is October 10, 2021. It happens only once in a lifetime because God wants us to establish our faith. When it will be happen again? That April 1, 2020, a Gregorian calendar in Bible is October 10. Now, let us look at in 3462. Oh, still, brothers and sisters, it will not repeat in where is that? I would like to add 2020 in 7857. You see? October 10. Therefore, in 2020, it will take 5,837 years in 2020. It will repeat again that April 1 in Gregorian, in Bible, October 10. That is a very strong evidence, my dear brothers and sisters. God is the author of the Bible. Even before, when was the Gregorian calendar had been introduced? 1582 AD. But it was written already in the book of Ezekiel to establish our faith. Why? Because it will never happen again. When it will happen again, would you think our world will exist another 6,000 years? Because 5,837 years, almost 6,000. Then the earth would exist 6,000 plus 5,000. Almost 12,000 years. Contradictory to the Bible. Contradictory to the shepherd's rod. Because the earth will exist only 6,000 years. That is infallible proof. That is the first one, which cannot be mistaken. Ezekiel 45 verse 18 is a prediction that the last seal under the sixth seal, represented by young bullock, the cleansing of the sanctuary, because it says, and cleanse the sanctuary, it must be on April 1. But that April 1 is not Bible calendar, that is Gregorian, because God did not change. The cleansing of the sanctuary will be on October 10. But there is a miracle in Ezekiel 45 verse 18. 1,000 years ago, it was predicted beforehand that the close of the judgment for the dead, that October 10 will fall in Gregorian calendar, April 1, 2020. If you will say that April 1, 2020 is not the fulfillment of Ezekiel 45, verse 18, then you will wait another 5,837 years, and that is in 7857 AD. 7,857 AD will repeat again that April 1, 7857 is October 10 in Bible calendar. That proof alone is strong enough that the judgment that pertains to the dead, blotting out of names, unless the close of the judgment for the dead be made known to us, we would have no present truth. But thank the Lord, we have the present truth. Why? Because the knowledge concerning the judgment for the dead, when it was closed, it was bestowed by God unto us. And we have the abundance of present truth. Plenty of green pastures bestowed by God to the layman's movement. To the honest and sincere, that proof alone is sufficient. Nobody can explain Ezekiel 45 verse 18. Try to explain. That is why B.T. Hotep says, I would like to stand with this position. 1 TG number 17, page 11. Since this truth, 1 TG number 17, page 11. Since this truth is so vitally important, do not let any enemy against revealed truth confuse you. If he tries to convince you against this truth, you take him to task make him give a more biblical interpretation of these scriptures. If he cannot give you something better or as good, then tell him to mind his own business and you will mind yours. Now, to those who will oppose this message, ask them, explain Ezekiel 45, verse 18. In 1TG number 18, page 21 and 22, it says, they ever try to take away what we have on these scriptures, but never give us something better. They cannot give any explanation with Ezekiel 45, verse 18. Ask them, what cleansing of the sanctuary that will occur on April 1? That prediction in Ezekiel 45, verse 18. And what is the second proof? We will gradually show to you the abundance of evidences. The second proof is the new moon. Without the writings of inspiration, we will never knew that Psalms 81 is pointing to the Day of Atonement. Let us read Psalms 81, verse 3. Blow up the trumpet in the new moon, in the time appointed on our solemn feast day. Psalms 81, verse 3. Blow up the trumpet in the new moon, in the time appointed on our solemn feast day. Time appointed. There is a time appointed. And we trace up from October 22, 1844. Only 2020. Now, let us show our diagram, the new moon. Now, look at, you can see that on Wikipedia or in Google. In 1844, the new moon appeared in October 11. And you will count 10 days, October 21, 1844. In Bible calendar, that is the Day of Atonement. The Day of Atonement on earth, but in heaven, midnight, October 22. Now, in 2020, the new moon appeared on March 24. And you will count 10 days, you will fall October 11, 2021. Therefore, the Day of Atonement, it was in October 10. Or April 1, 2020. And we try to look at all the new moon every year, only 1844 and 2020, by which, brothers and sisters, from the time the new moon appeared, you will count 10 days. Now, for example, this year, 2000, March 27, 2021. Look at March, or January, February, March. Look at the new moon on March. When does the new moon? March 2021. Do you know how to find out? When does the new moon appear? April 12. You see? You will count 10 days. That must be April 22. How about in the month of March itself? Because I think every month there is new moon. Where is the new moon? New moon. March 13? March 13. You will count 10 days, March 23. From 1844, brethren, we count every year, only 2020. The same pattern in 1844. Because God gave the two infallible proofs so that we could understand that the judgment for the dead is close. What is the sign of the commencement of the judgment that pertains to the dead? New moon. And according to the voice of inspiration, the sign that God will give when these proceedings that pertains to the dead will close is also new moon. Only God can control the heavenly planets. The reason that God controlled the heavenly planets, that there was no year by which in the Bible calendar, October 10, you will count backward, the new moon appeared. Or you will count from the time the new moon appeared in October, you will count 10 days, that is October 10. Only in 1844 and 2020, because God guarded the new moon as the sign that you will know when the judgment that pertains to the dead in the holy place will close. Impregnable evidence by which it cannot be mistaken. New moon and Ezekiel 45, verse 18. And the other one is the middle of the week. The middle of the week, by which April 1, Wednesday, is the Day of Atonement. October 10. One of the signs that was given in the midst of the week. Daniel chapter 9. I would like to read the statement. Although it is a little bit deeper, but we'll continue it on our another episode. It says in 2SR on page 2SR page 69, it says, as God could not overthrow the world, 2SR page 69, as God could not overthrow the world by water the second time, and yet keep his never-failing promise to his faithful servant, Noah. He sent his son to die in the world's stead. Therefore, the world perished not because of the supreme sacrifice of the Son of God. What world? Brothers and sisters, that is from 31 or from the days of, from the third seal up to 1844. That world perished not because of the supreme sacrifice of the Son of God. And the world exists today because Christ arose from the dead. So, why is it that the world today exists? Because Christ arose from the dead. What day? Sunday. That is the time by which Jesus Christ was resurrected. And we will show to you, brothers and sisters, that the entire proceedings in the heavenly sanctuary was revealed by God through that historical event, the crucifixion. Remember in Daniel chapter 9, it says, in the midst of the week, the Messiah would be cut off. But Jesus Christ died on the cross on Friday, on the 6th day of the week. So in the primary application, in the midst of the week, is applied only to the last 7 years. 3.5 years from Christ's baptism to his crucifixion. Then 3.5 years from his crucifixion to the stoning of Stephen. The end part of the 490 years. But there is a double application in that subject. And it is more pertaining to Christ's mediatorial work in the heavenly sanctuary. So, to repeat again, brothers and sisters, to my fellow Shepherd's Rod believer, hoping before you will reject the message, you need to study first. Do not immediately reject the message without investigating closely. As a matter of fact, the time is running out. And our opposition will not last any longer because Jesus Christ will vindicate his words. And that event will no longer far distant from this time. This year is the acceptable year of the Lord. After this year, commence the day of vengeance. So, thank you very much, brethren, for listening and viewing this program. To repeat again, there are two infallible proofs that had been given by God to let us know that the proceedings that pertains to the dead in the holy place will be closed. Ezekiel 45:18 and the new moon. And we will present to you another evidences. But at this time, we give to you two impregnable evidence, infallible proof. It can never be mistaken. Why? Who control the moon, the sun, and the stars? Only God. Why God did not allow that the new moon will appear in October 1 in every year, only once in a lifetime, in 1844. Brothers and sisters, and in 2020. Ponder deeply, brothers and sisters. because it is God who control the heavenly planets. And if God will let the moon appear more than twice, then it will cause confusion. But look at 178 years from 1844 to 2020. Never happened except in 1844 and in 2020. And in 2020, we already look at the time and death calculator. It will repeat again in 7857 AD. It will take 5,837 years from now to repeat it again. Can you imagine? Would you think the world will exist from now almost 6,000 years, another 6,000 years? Contradictory to the Bible. And second one, the reason that all scholars, Bible scholars, had been confused, I read many Bible scholars and they say it's hard to understand Ezekiel 45:18. Even the Seventh-day Adventist Bible commentary, it says that it seems that God changes the cleansing of the sanctuary. Instead of October 10, it is April 1. But God never changes. That is the only conclusion that they made. Because Ezekiel 45 verse 18 is very clear. April 1, the sanctuary must be cleansed. But it is a prediction. 1,000 years ago, predicted beforehand, that the last seal under the judgment that pertains to the dead, the sixth seal, their proceedings in the holy place will be completely finished on April 1, 2020. Because there is no other April 1, which is October 10 in Bible calendar, except April 1, 2020. And it will never repeat again. Yes, it will repeat again, but it will take 5,837 years to repeat such occurrence. And that is very impossible. So hoping, brethren, to repeat again, we need to study and to humble ourselves. Because there are many who, because of prejudice, will never know the truth. Volume 6, 314. We love you, brethren, and hoping to see you in God's kingdom. Thank you very much for listening and viewing this program. May the good Lord bless you and have a beautiful, wonderful evening.